Good morning. You all early even.
Hi,
Nice to see you again. How are you?
fine, and you?
Trying to adjust to the humidity here in Germany. I'm not used to it. So with this heat wave, I'm just not sure how to handle it.
You're coming from the West Coast and you find it hard to handle here?
Well, I lived in the mountains of California,
Okay.
not like the hot beaches. And it was very, very dry. So even when it did get hot, it's a very different experience than when it's that same temperature, but with humidity.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
and in California, where it does get hot, you have air conditioning everywhere. So that's also different.
Yeah, that's definitely a different thing, but it starts to get really popular here as well.
Yeah, unfortunately not in my house. So
But you could
but
change that if you like,
I
right?
could change it. I mean, I could get like a little in-room portable AC, but it feels like summer's almost over. It seems silly to spend the money on that now. I'm just waiting for the heat wave to break.
Yeah, I have a centralized cooling with my floor heating and cooling system, so I can heat and cool the whole building. But I normally don't use the cooling feature because it takes like 1 day to cool down the house and costs a lot of energy. And for 3 days, it's not, from my point of not worth it. But if you have really a longer high heat period, I turn it on.
So I think we have that. Well, anyway, I'll ping you offline. I don't want to take up more time talking about my climate problems.
German Apartments 101.
All right. Thank you for joining us. I'm really happy to see more faces in this meeting. Quick poll, does this time work better or worse than the time it used to be? Thumbs up for better, thumbs down for worse. Getting 2 thumbs up, 3 thumbs up. Rahab has a thumb. Okay, good. Then let's leave it here. Okay, a couple of quick announcements. We had a discussion about deprecating 898 last week. So to follow up on that, if you have any feedback about that, Alan would love to hear it in that comment thread in the Epic. Want to make sure that if it did fill a need that we weren't aware of, that is captured, and we can make sure everybody's getting what they need in terms of visibility. And speaking of visibility, just wanted to make sure everyone's aware of reliability department as a whole. Our top level objectives for Q3 are linked there, and then everybody's subsequent KRs kind of feed into one of these 3. And A is where most of our sub-department team will be captured. So feel free to check those out. And that also kind of gives you a sense of who's doing what for what reason this quarter. Would you like to verbalize? I can take notes while you're checking.
I don't think I heard you.
Ken, did you want to verbalize that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm typing. My mind is not on just typing here. Sorry. Oh yes. Just wanted to provide visibility that the PG upgrade for the main DB is scheduled for this weekend. So far we are on track and no changes to the plan. We should be able to continue as scheduled.
Awesome. If it's anywhere near as smooth as the last one, a big round of applause to everybody in advance.
Thank you.
All right. Unless there's anything else anyone wants to bring up for discussion, Steve has volunteered to do a demo. This came out of the discussion from last week, where it's it's important to me that this meeting be valuable and worth attending. And I think one of the things that can make it valuable is when we all share our various domains of expertise with each other. And so in that line, Steve, take it away.
Sure, thanks. So a few weeks back, I was talking to some foundation folks about how to create dashboards via code. And the biggest complaint is JSON is hard to like learn or do, and we don't really have any guidance on how dashboards are actually created. So if you look at point number D, we opened up an issue to start creating some training material for JSONet and how to use dashboards. So I tried, like, I'm using this opportunity to do it because I've recently done it this week on a new dashboard that I wanted to create right here. So if you're interested on how full dashboard looks like, this is how it was created. But stepping a bit back, so what do we mean by creating a dashboard via code? So
Sorry, quick interruption, Steve. Would you mind making your font a little bit bigger? My
sure thing.
little
Yep.
eyes are having trouble.
Yes, of course. So
Thank you.
what we mean by dashboard via code is if we look at, for example, this dashboard that just opens, or let's pick another one, like, for example, API overview, right? There are two ways to achieve this. Either go in Grafana, edit it, add new panels, and so on and so forth, which is good and easy to set up, but it does bring all the drawbacks of what I call ClickUps, where you can't really reuse it, you can't really reproduce it easily, and like doing a diff, like, for example, oh, we have a problem with this saturation graph, you can't really get a code review out of it and things like that, right? So we end up generating these dashboards through a library called Grafana. Should have added this here. I'll add it here. So this is an official library from Grafana, which is deprecated because it moved to a different place, basically. But we're just using the old version. Unfortunately, we just need to upgrade that. But basically, this uses something called jsonnet, which is a configuration language, very similar to JSON, that generates JSON, basically. So that's why I call it a configuration language, not a programming language. And it also says it's a configuration language. And the reason we want to generate JSON is because if we look at this dashboard, and for example, we inspect a panel, it's all JSON at the end of the day. So it's just generating a bunch of JSON JSON. And basically, this library gives us an API. Hey, give me a panel. So what a panel is give me this box, and then it will automatically generate the JSON. So I'll walk through how to create a dashboard and use an API in a live demo. But for now, I'll pause here if anyone has any questions.
I think I just got a bit distracted in my head. I was watching everything you were showing, but I got distracted and I missed the link between Grafana Lab and the dashboard.
Sure. So Grafana is used. So it's turtles all the way down. So the lowest turtle is JSON, right? JSONet is a configuration language used to generate JSON. So for example, if we look at the first example here, we have person 1 and person 2 is referencing person 1. So and ends up generating this JSON, right? So JSONet is used as a configuration language to generate JSON. Now, We have a library called Grafana. Well, Grafana has a library called Grafana, which uses JSONnet to generate JSON for these panels. So if we look at inspect panel JSON, it's a bunch of JSON. Like writing this by hand is way too much and probably not even feasible, to be honest. Some dashboards end up with like 10,000 lines of JSON, so it's not really feasible, right? So Grafana was created to make this a little bit easier. And I'll explain a bit more clearly when I go in the demo, but basically it's saying, hey, create me a panel. Hey, create me a time series. Hey, create me a dashboard, and it will automatically create the JSON stuff for it. Does that make sense, Rahab?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sorry,
Any
I
other-
use this interruption. I understand that JSON is would be quite repetitive if we have to write everything. So we are using JSONnet to give us some additional features. Do you, from the level of complexity, JSONnet is helping us to achieve our goals, or do you see us in the near future switching to a different language that gives even more possibilities, like for example Ruby, to generate the dashboards we need?
Sure. Yeah. So my opinion is JSON, like I quite enjoy JSON. It is hard to get started with, and some people say it's a programming language. So they think a lot of functions returning stuff, and then you can do stuff with that function, which is, I don't think it's correct, because this is a configuration language. So it's a generator rather than anything else. So you have to think a little bit differently. Now, yes, it is complex. We do have some complex JSON code. But if you look at the amount of JSON it generates, I say it's worth it, simply because it allows us to have these cookie cutter dashboards. So if you look at any service we have, so you see how we have AppDex, error ratio, RPS, and saturation. If we go to any other service, so if we go onto the web service, we get this here. So we get the cookie cutter benefits, the templating benefits. Now, you mentioned any other language in the future. So Grafana itself is slowly moving away from JSONnet themselves, moving to something called QLang, which is also another configuration language. It has some extra benefits because it has validation built in and schema definitions and so on and so forth, but I won't go into QLang itself. You mentioned Ruby and things like that. Now, I mean, we can certainly use Ruby if we want to. It's just might end up being more complex because Ruby provides a lot of different things, in the sense, like we have to marshal the JSON somehow, right? We have to generate the JSON. Like, it is completely possible. It's just configuration languages are a bit easier and more limited around this. And as a background, both Q and JSONnet came from a configuration language within Google. I forgot the name of it, but basically Q and JSONnet are both inspired from this configuration within Google. So yeah, like using the programming languages for configuration, like JavaScript does this a lot as well. Like they have TypeScript as a configuration. I think it ends up being very complex, because then you have a bunch of if conditions. You can start looking at environment variables. You can start looking at any other programming language can do, right? So it ends up being a little bit more complex for generated configuration. But I guess that's what people prefer as well.
Okay,
Does that
thank
answer
you.
your
So,
question?
yeah, to sum it up, you think JSONnet is sufficient to solve our problems, and we don't have to expect to learn something else in the near future?
I don't think we're moving away from JSONnet anytime soon. We're bought in too much into it. So existing stuff will not move away from JSONnet. I mean, I don't see much benefit of doing that. Like, new stuff can start moving to Q, I think, if we want to. But then again, if we introduce a new tool, that is probably not a good idea either. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Awesome. So let's move on to a live demo. Or actually, before we move on to a live demo, I want to walk through where our dashboards are, right? So the dashboards I showed, they're actually inside of our runbook repository right here. So if we go on the dashboards directory, let me zoom in, sorry. Dashboards directory, we have a README file that explains it quite well, I think, anyways. So feel free to read that. I think I won't read it out loud, but basically, the big thing you need to know is the structure. So we have dashboards, the name of the service, and then the name of the dashboard, right? So let's pick, I don't know, Vault, for example. So we have Vault, and then the main dashboard, right? And here we can see the jsonnet code. And if we look at the dashboard, so if we do Vault overview, this JSON code ends up translating into this stuff right here. And then we can see, like, for example, let's pick another one, API. We can see it has multiple dashboards, right? And if you look at the main one, you actually look at service dashboard, and service dashboard is actually an internal library to create those cookie cutter dashboards that we talked about earlier. So let's move on to creating a dashboard ourselves, right? So I'm inside of the runbooks directory, so I'm going to go inside of dashboards. And let's say we want to create a new one for something that I'm most familiar with, Gitly, right? So let's go to Gitly. So we already have 3 dashboards, 1, 2, 3, 4. I can't count, sorry, 4 dashboards. So let's create a new one, right? So let's open up Vim, and then if we create a new file under Gitly, let's name it reliability demo.jsonnet, right? So we created a new dashboard here, a new file, and I honestly don't remember the syntax by heart, so I always go into one of the dashboards and copy paste some of the basic stuff. So JSonnet has something called imports. I won't go into too much JSonnet stuff. That could be another whole demo on what JSonnet is and how to use it. But basically, this is importing some libraries. Like if you're familiar with Ruby or any other programming language, it's using a class, for example, right? So here we are importing Grafana, importing our basic like our wrapper library for Grafana, and some other layout library that wraps this one basically. So these 2 are wrapper libraries, and if you look at our code, we're pretty much using these everywhere. So what's next? So we have this, and if we look at here, let's move down a bit further. So this is the first thing we need to do, right? So we have to do basic.dashboard, and we'll just give it a name. So for example, reliability demo, and some tags if we want to. So let's give it demo here. There we go. So this is a basic dashboard. So, okay, how does this translate to JSON, right? How does that translate to JSON, basically? So if we look at the README file of dashboards README, we can generate snapshots. So basically, we can test what we just wrote, basically, right? And this is using the task dashboard.sh. So this is generating a snapshot inside of dashboards.gitlab.net, so you don't have to run Grafana locally or anything like that. It uses the API to generate snapshots. So if we go inside of runbook, dashboards, we'll source on this environment.sh is within this library, and that's just generating an environment variable with a token, and then test dashboard, and then the path. So right, we moved it to Kitily reliability demo. So we'll run that, and it gives us a URL. So if we do this, it created a new dashboard. That's the title.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So in the README, there was like a link, sorry, a variable. So you didn't pass that variable. Where is it being set?
Yeah. So if you source that variable, which one? This one?
Score path.
Yeah, the dashboard part. This is where I passed it here. I didn't pass the -d flag. I just passed it directly.
I see. Okay.
So
Oh,
dashboard path is the actual file path for the
Okay.
JSON net file. Does that
for
make
some
sense?
reason I took the URL. Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah. It's the path of, so that's dashboard folder path file. So it shows it here, for example. So it's the file path on disk for the dashboard.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? So as we saw here, it generated a dashboard for us with the title we wanted, and it also ended up giving us these cookie cutter, they're called them template variables, basically. So which Prometheus, which environment if you want to toggle canary. And this is the benefits of using the JSONnet library we have, is because this comes out of the box. We don't have to copy paste the code every time. And if we look at, let me try and remember on how to do that. Yes, if we look at the export and view JSON, it's all this JSON file that it generated for us, basically out of the box, by just writing a few lines of code, which is this one, right? So let's add a panel to it, right? Like a dashboard is useful when you have a panel to it, right? So again, I don't remember the syntax by heart, so I'm gonna do what every developer does and copy paste things. So we'll go here. So you can look at any dashboard, right? Like there's multiple ones of them. So we'll start with this one. So let's add a row. So in Grafana, everything is a panel, even a row. So what do we mean? What do I mean by a row? So if we look here, this is a row where we can expand it and collapse it, right? That is a row, but the row itself is a panel. I know it's a bit confusing, but that's how Grafana does it. So basically you have panels within panels within panels. So let's add a panel. It's going to be a row, for example, and let's name it my first row. And then you give it create positions. So this is, I think, the most confusing part. Like what should the x-axis be, the y-axis be, width and height, right? If you're familiar with CSS, like not CSS, if you're familiar with CSS, these are like grid positions, basically, right? So the first row we'll start with 1000, right? It can be 100, it can be whatever. We just start with 1000 for whatever reason. So that will create a row for us. But now you can see that I have an error, unknown variable row. And that is because if you look at the local here, so this is creating a variable called row, and it's pointing to grafana.row. So technically, I don't really need this. If I want to, I could just go here and say Grafana.row. And it's basically using the row definition from this library. So I think if I go here, yeah. So my editor can go into the method itself, and this is what it's doing basically behind the scenes. So let's save it, and now again rinse and repeat. Just test the dashboard, create a snapshot. These snapshots are created after are deleted after 24 hours. So I honestly, when I'm developing a dashboard, probably I have 100 snapshots. So they're very cheap to create. So feel free to create as many as you want. And here we can see we created our first row, right? And now let's add actual graphs around it, right? So let's go here and let's add a new panel. So add panel. And so now we want to add let's say we want to add 3 blocks like these, right? Three panels like this. So we want what we could call a grid. This is what Grafana calls a grid, basically. So if we look here, find it, so add panel, and then add panels. Sorry, so because we're adding multiple ones, and now we're adding a layout called grid. So this means it's gonna take an array of panels, right? So let's start with a very basic one, which is basic.time series. So basic.time series means we want a time series panel. So it would be, let me find a dashboard that actually has some data in it. So let's go to the overview, for example. So this is a time series right over here, where we have the x-axis are time, the y-axis is the count or whatever, and we're looking at a series of that. Now, Grafana has a lot of visualization types. If you search for Grafana visualization, it has a list here on the left side. So this is the time series list. You can do bar chart, and like we have access to all these. We can do canvas if we want. We can do a data grid. So for example, if something returns a list of things, we can show it in a table. For example, we can do heat maps to look at latency hotspots, for example, and whatnot. And we do have access to all of these right here through jsonnet. So let's start with basic.time series, right? So we want to create a new time series. So first of all, what is the title? So the title is my first time series dashboard, right? And then we can give it a description, but I'm lazy, I'm not gonna do that. And now we want to give it the query that we actually want to run, right? So let's do, does anyone has a specific Thanos query that they want to show off? Maybe, if not, I can think of one, I guess. Territory position, like, I don't know. What is a simple query here? Yeah, let's do this. So utility concurrency started. So this query will show us something like this. So it will show us a graph like this. I know it's very boring because it's very flat, but whatever. So we want the query, and that should be the most basic thing we need, right? So let's run this. This will create a new snapshot. And if we look here, we created our first dashboard right here. Now you can see that it's not within the row. And I did that on purpose because then now we have to specify hey, where do I want this row basically? And this is where you put in start row and columns. So since this is a grid, we have to give it the amount of columns, right? So let's say we want 3 columns in this grid, and it will automatically resize things. And start row is where it's going to start. So we already have a panel with a y-axis of 1000, right? And we want it to be in this panel. So we'll give it something higher, 1100 or like 1001, right? And if we generate this one more time, it is within my row right here. Any questions so far?
Yeah, you've given it 1100. If you increase it to something like 1200, will that have an effect?
Currently, no. It could be also be 9000 if we want. So the way the y-axis work is from top to bottom, right? Like from 1 to 10,000, I guess, or whatever the limit is of the y-axis. So it is like whatever number. We just stick with the 1000 numbers. So we kind of, if we have multiple rows, we can say, hey, this panel belongs to this row, this panel belongs to that row. So I think the most annoying part about this library is defining the y-axis. It doesn't do it automatically for you, unfortunately. So if we add, like, for example, another row here. So let's say we add another row and the y-axis is 5000, right? Since this is 9000, my second row, since it's 9000, it will fall under this one because it's from top to bottom. And if we test this, we see it actually ended up in my second row, not my first row. So the code order does not matter here because of the y-axis and the start row, basically.
I think that's the most confusing part for me.
It is very, very, very confusing, and it's very annoying, unfortunately. It kind of like the UI when you're creating a dashboard by hand, you still kind of have to do that, but with drag and drop, because when you create a new dashboard through the UI, you drag and drop and resize automatically. This is just the code version of how to do it. Unfortunately, it is a bit confusing. The only nice pattern that I found is when you create a row, you create it at a 1000th level, so 1000 here, and then when you add panels to it, you start adding 1001. And let's say we want another grid to it, we give it so 1001, and then we give it 1100. So there are space for multiple panels there, for example, right? So if we test this, it should show us 2 dashboards under my first row here. So, and see how it moved it to the bottom, not next to it, because we gave it the start row to be 1100 rather than a lower value. And columns means how many columns. So if we really want one column here, let's say we want this the whole width, right? The second one, we save it like this, and it will give us the whole column here. So it's about columns and rows, basically. So the order, I'm not gonna lie, the order of things is hard to get used to. But once you get used to it, it's I think it's okay to keep a mental model of it. So I won't say it's straightforward because it's not.
Steve, can you quickly demo how to get them next to each other then?
Yeah,
Rather
so
than
these
one on top of
two,
the other?
so if we want these two next to each other, then I said we have a grid, right? So it's a matter of moving this one inside of this array. So here is the array, right? So we just add it here, and let's delete this grid because we don't need it anymore. And if we try it again, it should be next to each other, because like this. And we can add like 20 of these, right? And if we want to. And if we look at more than 3, so we added more than 3 here in this grid, it will automatically stack them next to each other. Here we can see like it moved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So from a x-axis and y-axis, it keeps automatically appending to it. That's why we only have to specify the start row. So it starts from the row we give it, and it keeps appending to it accordingly. So let's add another type of dashboard, right? One thing we see a lot of things is time series. Another one is when we have a stat panel. So what is a stat panel? So let me close up some of this mess here. Grafana visualization. If we look at the visualization, if we look at stats, so this is where it gives us a specific number, right? For example, how many replicas we have for Postgres, for example, right? Let's go here, and this would be another basic thing. So basic.stat. And if you look at the definition of it, panel, I think. Basic.stat. Yes, it is basic.stat panel. There we go. Now we give it a title. For example, let's give it stat. And let's just run it like this and see what happens, right? It will actually give us an error that there's a missing argument. So with JSON, we can also say, hey, please, this parameter is actually required, for example, right? And the panel always requires the stat panel always require the panel title. Now, panel title and title are very, very confusing from a stat panel point of view, but that's just because of how the stat panel works. So you see backend ops 01, that is the title. The panel title is the actual thing here. So if you look at text mode.value, that is the panel title. So that's why it requires it, I guess. So panel title, low panel title. If we run this, oops, something else, missing argument color. So oops, let's do color equals none, because we don't want any colors. And another one, missing argument query. So we need to run a query. So here, like JSonnet and our libraries also inform you what you actually need to specify. So query, I don't know, this should be a counter. So can anyone think about metric that will give us just a small number? I could use the same metric actually. So here, this should give us 1, right? And we run this. Let's see if it works. It worked. So everything passed, and it should have created us a stat panel. And here, my first stat. It looks very, very ugly because I didn't specify the colors and things like that. But that's how you create a stat panel. As I said, copy paste in the sense, look at other usages of this one. You can also go into the basic structure. So here we're importing basic from Grafana basic.libsonnet, right? So if we open that up, libsonnet Grafana basic dot, we can look at time series, for example, and this is the time series definition. So we can specify a title, a description, legend format, and this is where you can actually look at what you can specify and how to specify it, right? And we can have multi-time series. So for example, how many, like when we want multiple lines, for example, and things like that. So I think one improvement we can make here is actually publishing some kind of automatic documentation of like what methods are available to you and what you can call. I don't think we have an issue for that, or we actually discussed that, but that's one thing that I feel like is a pain point for us right now. Like people don't know what they can call and what they can specify. So yeah, I think I'll end my demo here because maybe we're at time. Yes, we're above time. So I'm happy to stay a bit longer and ask any questions, but yeah, answer any questions, sorry.
But I want to say thank you very, 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 very much, because I needed to hear this actually. And I guess one question that I have is, I saw that you pulled the JSON that was generated from Grafana, and I was just wondering, like a very stupid question, like can we reverse engineer that? So can I add panels in Grafana by hand
Yeah.
and then kind of?
Yeah, you can. You certainly can. I've done it in the past. So when I looked at, and I'll actually show you how I've done it in the past. So if we go inside of the runbooks, so quite recently the observability team added support for Loki, right? Which is a new logging infrastructure that's still under proof of concept. The benefit of Loki is we can have graphs generated from logs within Grafana itself. And I wanted to do this in the most recent dashboard I created here. So I wanted to check how many info logs and if we have any error logs here, right? So these are generated from Loki. So I actually ended up going to panel JSON and trying to figure out how it does it. So it specifies a data source, and then you specify the type, right? And then I had to reverse engineer basically how we generate the JSON, and it resulted into this merge request. If this loads, it is completely possible. You just have to look at all the methods we're calling and how it's generating it. But then so basically it allowed me to find out that, oh, we just need to specify the data source. And I looked at the JSON, I looked at how it was specifying it, and then I looked, okay, we need to specify the JSON. We hard coded it to the Prometheus server, basically. So now we can specify data source and the defaults to Prometheus DS. So it's
correct me if I'm wrong, but it's doable, but it actually requires a fair amount of context and knowledge of how JSONnet does the translation, right?
Correct,
it's not like there's an easy export into JSONnet
no, unfortunately
button
no.
and it's done for you.
No, you're completely right. So if let's say we want to look at, I don't know, some dashboard that's managed by hand. So let's say filter by tag, unmanaged. So for example, these are all unmanaged dashboards. So unmanaged dashboards means they are created by hand. And if we look at, I don't know, I doubt any of the, yeah, like if we want this, we'd have to write it by hand. We can't really export it and translate it. We just have to say, okay, this query is using this one. So let me create a panel and move it to demo, and like have to generate all this and generate this one here. So I have to do all that by hand. Unfortunately, there's no easy way to translate handwritten dashboards with JSON to JSONnet. So I'm not sure if this is gonna work. Maybe it does.
I think you accidentally added an A after HTTP proxy, a underscore server, some backend code.
Yes, thank you. I would have never figured that out and probably would have copy pasted. Didn't matric again, and it works. So unfortunately, you have to generate it by hand, like write it by hand. This part.
Yeah, I mean, Good enough. I'm not complaining. I was just wondering. Thank you.
And like the nice part about JSONnet, because it's fairly simple in the sense like you can create atrocious JSONnet code, but it's also very simple. Like it's just generating a JSON structure. So just think about it's just generating JSON structure. It's not like manipulating, like it is manipulating JSON, but at the end of the day, it's just JSON. So it's not reaching to APIs or like doing any concurrency or whatnot, like any other programming language would do, right? It's very, very declarative and yeah, it's mostly declarative kind of thing. So yeah.
I think one of the things that I struggled with in the past with JSonnet is that there are some ordering things that are not immediately obvious that can be a little bit of a gotcha.
Okay. Well, what kind of ordering things, if you don't mind me asking?
Like, this was outside of the runbook, so we were trying to kind of start from scratch. So that didn't help, right? That made it
Okay.
a little extra hard, but there were just some things that, and this is also over 2 years ago, so I can't, it's hard for me to remember.
Okay.
Specifically. Sorry. I just remember feeling surprised at how the declarative things were being applied.
Okay. Yeah, you have to specify variables at the top and like import libraries in the right order, because like if one library depends on another library, you have to import them in the right order and things like that. You don't have like a dependency tree out of the box like any other programming language.
Well, thank you. This is super helpful to see. I will grab the recording link after it's done processing and post it in the agenda so people can watch it in their
Perfect.
options.
Any other questions before we end?
Thank you
For
so
me,
much. Nice.
yeah, for me also it's just a comment. This is quite helpful. I was having a headache figuring out the panels and the grid. I actually used to literally count them and go to the JSON and adjust, and then one panel overlaps with the other. But this is a really cool trick to learn.
Perfect. Awesome. If you are creating a dashboard with code and you get stuck, feel free to ping me. I'm more than happy to help. There's other JSONet experts, like the scalability team is probably the most people that I think we should not call them SREs, we should call them JSONet developers, because that's all they do. Because we also use JSON to generate recording rules for Prometheus, and all our SLIs and SLOs are created through JSON. So that's all they do all day, unfortunately.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you for a very successful demo. Appreciate it.
Thank you for pushing us,
much.
Annalisa. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. All right. Everybody else, if you have things, and I know you do, that you're good at that you'd like to share, put them on the agenda, talk to me about it if you have an idea. Yeah, I mean, we are all really knowledgeable in some areas that other people aren't. And I think there's a huge opportunity to cross-pollinate. So, more of this, please. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Bye.